Welcome to this episode of Martial Truth Podcast. My interview with Shifu Mark Wiley. Mark Wiley is an author of about 14 books, advanced practitioner of Escrima and 5 Ancestor Fist Kung Fu. He's trained in many martial arts. He's had a very interesting journey, and I hope you enjoy the interview with him. I know I learned a lot, and I'm hoping you guys learn a lot. As always, I appreciate you all. Without you guys, this couldn't be possible. Again, please, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button. Please like the video. It helps a lot. Share it, really good. Consider becoming a member. Membership's growing. Subscribers are growing, all right? Great. Planning on doing more interviews, other things coming down the pike, as we say. We have products you can purchase. If you look in the bottom of the YouTube video, you'll see that. So keep that in mind. I also want to mention this weekend's Memorial Day. Thinking about all the men and women, people in general, who have gave their lives to protect us and allow us to live under this flag of freedom we live under. We should all take a moment this weekend to think about them, all right? It's very important, all right? Without them, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to live the life that we live, all right? Here's a couple of Mark's books that I have in my possession, which are great, okay? Highly recommend them. As he'll talk about in the interview, he's got a future book coming out in 5 Ancestor Fist, so that's something to look forward to, all right? Without further ado, here's Mark Wiley. Mark Wiley, welcome to the Martial Truth Podcast.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. I've been looking forward to having you on. Russ Smith had suggested it, which I thought was great. I'm a fan. I mean, I have a couple of your books here, I have,
the classics.
Yeah, the classics,
94 and 97. That's when they came out.
That makes it seem old, so don't say that.
I know.
So,
it ages us quickly.
So why don't you start with introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Let's see. I was born. We don't got to go back that far, but I started martial arts in 1979. Was getting picked on in school. Got beat up walking home from Cub Scouts. Me and this other kid liked the same girl. He's bigger than me. Most people are. And so my mom signed me up for Taekwondo lessons at the school that was close by. Byung-Yok Kwak is a teacher's name. And I just fell in love with martial arts. I started buying the magazines on the newsstands at all the bookstores that are no longer here. And watching the Saturday and Sunday afternoon Kung Fu shows, Kung Fu theater, Black Belt theater that used to be on TV, and falling in love with all that stuff. And then I started collecting books and going into Chinatown and doing all these things and just consume my life as it does for people. And, like the mob, you can never get out. No, no matter how hard you try.
No,
you can never get out.
They suck you right back in.
That's it. That's what happens.
Yep.
And, with the films, what really got me was that, all the masters in the film, the warrior would get defeated somewhere, go off, find some old master, would heal him up and teach him some secret techniques. And, and I wanted to learn all the secret techniques, and I wanted to learn the healing techniques. I grew up in chronic pain, being born so premature at only 6 months. And it just set my path that way. So,
well, 79 was a good year. I started that year. My Tai Chi master started Tai Chi that year. I started for a lot of the same reasons. There was an incident with my parents, with a group of individuals in the neighborhood where I lived, and I just decided I better learn how to fight. And I was a member of the YMCA, and I went down there and I signed up for the karate lessons. I didn't know who the guy was or anything. And, it was Isshinryu karate, which is great. I'm a lifelong Isshinryu karate practitioner. But I think originally, it was $15 a month I was paying.
Yeah.
Like that, like ridiculous number,
1 to 30, my mom had a fit and I had to chip in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that because I was 15 when I started, and when I got, probably I was doing it about a year, and I was working. I had a job, so I was paying. I told my mom, I says, "Oh, I'll pay for the lessons," and I paid for them monthly. But yeah, it was great. So 79 is a good year.
Nice.
So now your main areas of expertise, right, are the Filipino martial arts.
Yep.
Right. and 5 Ancestor Fist Kung Fu.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any I'm leaving out in terms of the really main ones?
Um, no, I would say just Qigong and Chinese
Okay.
medicine on
Okay.
top of that,
Right.
meditation and Qigong.
Right.
But yeah, I really the Filipino arts just swept me away, for a long, long time. And the 5 Ancestor fists, when I started doing it, there was so much depth, and I really connected with my teacher, the late Alex Coe, and I just dropped the other systems I was studying. It was
Okay.
like doing too many things, and then you find something that really strikes home,
Right.
and it's like I just want to get deep on this, and I'm glad that I did that. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Escrima though a little bit because again, I mean, I think obviously there's a lot more people now practicing Escrima in the United
Oh,
States.
for
But
sure.
but back when you started,
Yeah.
I don't think it was nearly as popular an art as it is now or well known. Um, I know you went to the Philippines, so why don't you give us a little bit about who you trained with? I know it was Cabalas, someone who survived, real combat death matches in
Right.
the Philippines. So why don't you talk about him a little bit and just give us a little
Sure.
bit of background on that?
Well, my first teacher was Remy Presas, the late
Okay.
grandmaster Remy Presas. He had a branch of his school in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, at the American Karate Studios, Joe
Okay.
Bridenstine, an Ed Parker school. And I was in high school, um, and started training there after school to learn the Arnis. And Joe ran the summer camps for modern Arnis on the East Coast. He was the one who started that. And then
Okay.
after some years, Remy Presas had a big East Coast following up and down the East Coast. But Joe had these big ones every year. And also then Remy was over a lot. Remy stayed at his house a lot. So I was close with him. So I got to spend that time with Remy as well. And but then I had seen in Dan Inosanto's book a story about an escrimador named Angel Cabalas. And he's sitting on a table with like a cigarette. He's got these bony arm, bony joint, and he looks like he's my height. I'm only 5'5", I'm a
Okay.
short guy. And I think he's like 5'4", Angel, or 5'3", or whatever. And how he just beat up these 3 goons in Alaska in the canneries when he was working. And, he went outside, got his knife, cut a tree branch off, cut the twigs off it, and went back in and whooped these guys. I was like, yeah, that sounds about what I want to learn. So I started, going to places where I could find teachers of his style, until I finally met him at a seminar in Chicago, and then started flying out to Stockton, California to train with him personally. And yeah, I just said to my mom, I want to go train with this old master in California. She said, okay, save your money, and when you get it, go. She didn't think I was going to do it. Boy, I washed so many dishes, bust so many tables after school. I'm like, I got the money. She's like, okay.
It, it
Uh,
it's amazing. It's amazing when you set your mind to something and you're serious and like um I saw Shogun when I was 16 and I
James,
immediately said I have to learn Japanese swordsmanship. Like this
yeah,
has to happen. And I asked my teacher, and he called, believe it or not, Aaron Banks in New York.
wow,
Right? Yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And he mentioned a Japanese instructor, but no one could find the guy. And I looked him up in the phone book, and there he was. And I called him in his house. And he said, "How'd you get this number?" I said, "It's in the phone book. I knew your name." He goes, "All right, call this number, and they'll give you all the info on the classes." I'm 16, turning 17. I'm taking a
Yeah,
bus and 2 trains. I'm paying for those lessons myself
yeah,
because I wanted to do it. And it's amazing when you want to do something, especially it seems in the martial arts, when you really want to do something, you set your mind to it, you're going to do
right.
it, you know? And I found every time that that was good. I mean, good things came with that. So,
Yeah.
so what happened the first time you went to California and met him and trained with him?
It was great. He picked me up in his car. It was like he's a little guy, but I forget what the model was. It was one of these big cars.
Okay.
And we get in there, and the roof, the roofs used to have this stuff taped, glued up on it, like
Right.
a
Yeah.
covering.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it was hanging down from the heat, the Stockton heat. And he goes, roof, forgot to fix it. It's like, I don't care. I'm just
Right.
like, oh my God, I'm sitting next to Angel
Right.
Cabalas.
Right.
Right, right.
Yeah. You're not
And
worried about the roof.
I don't
You're
care about the
shocked you're
roof.
actually sitting next to the master. Right.
Right, right. We trained in his house, and he was about I don't know, late 60s,
Okay.
and he's got two young kids in diapers running around and a young wife.
Okay.
Um, we're training all day in his house, and it's like, do the move slow, do them slow, do them slow. Anybody can move fast, but if they're not right, it's like music, you can play notes fast, but if you can't do it slow and in time, you really don't have the skill, right? And then, I slept in what I thought was a guest room, and then later I realized it was his bedroom because the wife and the kids slept in the other room, and he was sleeping on the sofa in the living room. So I was like, no, 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 we got to
Right.
change this up.
Right.
He was just so kind.
Right.
And we just really bonded. I felt like he was a grandfather to me. I was a teenager, I was in high school, and everything. And on one technique, we over 1 hour just having me repeat the block again and again and again for over an hour because I couldn't get it perfectly.
Right.
And then finally I got it. And to this day, I never lost the perfection of that move. And most of the people I see doing it are doing it incorrectly somehow,
So
you
it's
know?
interesting you say that because my Katori Shinto teacher, Sugino Sensei, he constantly says, initially he forces everyone to practice, as he says, slowly and correctly.
Right.
He says speed hides a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Looks very impressive, but if you really look, you'll see there's a lot of mistakes.
Right.
So he drills us constantly till we get it. And then if there's two guys that are more accomplished and you decide to turn it up a little bit, and as long as those techniques are still there and you're not all of a sudden sloppy and all over the place, he's like, good, right? But it's
Right.
amazing how the good teachers all seem to have that same type of philosophy where yes, it's great to do it fast. We all like to look fast and stuff, right? The chicks dig it, right?
Yeah.
But you
Chicks
know,
love us karate,
right. But the thing is if you're
Uh,
doing it fast and you're off on everything,
Right.
you know,
Doesn't matter.
yeah, and the problem is if you do it fast off the bat and now you've got these mistakes ingrained in your body. Okay,
Right.
now it becomes extremely difficult to get them out.
Right.
So I think that was great advice what he gave you because I thought the same advice I received from Sugino Sensei I thought was fantastic, you know.
Yeah.
And and now you were one of the few guys that you received like a master's instructor certification from him, correct?
Right.
Are you the
Yeah, I was
only
the
guy
14th.
or
No, no, no. There's
okay.
like I think by the end there were 16 or
Okay.
something,
Well, that's
and I
good
was
actually.
number yeah, I was number 14.
Right.
Maybe there were 17. I don't
Right.
want to cut anybody out, but I'm
Right.
thinking I don't remember. I don't think about it,
Right.
anymore. But yeah,
And
number 14.
and is
Hmm.
the system still going strong?
Yeah, he's got a lot. All his guys in Stockton, California, are
Okay.
out. I mean, as happens when everyone passes away, the
Oh,
group splinters.
of course.
Everybody wants to be the headmaster. Someone
Right.
stole the sign off the building during the funeral. It's
Unbelievable.
like it's insane. And then there's fractions between everybody hates everybody for a while, then they get back together,
Right.
and everybody's got different groups, and everybody's changing the art and doing this stuff. So, you know, I do my own thing.
So
Can't
what
be involved.
what's funny with that, this seems to happen on every art, right?
Every
What's
art.
what's funny is if a person only does one art, they think, oh yeah, what happened in our art? And I'm like, no, 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 no. This
It's
happens
everything.
every art. Like,
Corporations,
oh,
creative stuff.
yes, yeah,
It happens.
everything.
It's human condition.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably gonna survive two of my masters.
Hmm.
Because they're both in their 80s. So I'll be through those transitions in two different arts I do.
Yeah.
And, for me personally, I don't really care who becomes the headmaster. To me,
Right.
it's about the art. So I'll just train with whoever that person appoints the next guy. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm senior, especially in the karate. And so
Hmm.
why do I'm not worried about so much instruction as just someone who treats me okay. That's really
Yeah.
what I worry about at this
Well,
point.
that's what usually comes down to. Whoever forces himself into the position starts making unrealistic requests, like, "Oh, if you're under me now that my father's, not there, I don't recognize. You got to retest and pay me a fee." And like, "Oh,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's gonna happen."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
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 But you're right. I mean, it does become a problem. And what's sad is a lot of times, and I firmly believe this is, if these guys would just take a step back before they literally go off on a tangent, right? Because of some perceived slight or something, and would really just kind of take a step back and think about it. If everyone stayed together and everyone, the new headmaster treated everyone right,
Yeah.
things would be so powerful
Yeah.
for that particular art. I mean, it would be amazing. But a lot
Yeah.
of guys, they feel they're passed over, or they feel this, or they feel slighted, and they can't get that out of their head, and it winds up, that it's something they just can't get past. They can't get
Right.
past, you know.
The egos are there. I can't have someone be over me who used to be equal to me.
Right, right.
Right. So whatevs.
Yeah,
Whatevs. So
yeah. I
that's why I
mean,
had many teachers. I had
right.
7 main teachers in the Filipino arts that I went through their entire systems,
Okay,
beginning with them, and probably, you know, 20 something, 22 trips to the Philippines where I went to research, not just to, sightsee and train with one guy.
right,
I went up and down the islands,
right,
Mindanao, Visayas, Luzon, and met and researched and interviewed. So that one of the books you held up was like the start of my research.
right,
The Filipino martial culture, has bios of different masters in there, and a bunch of them nobody ever heard of before I wrote them. And then all of a sudden their careers took off. People were
right.
flying to the Philippines or flying around the country to go see them, to study with them, and that whole generation has passed on. Who's in that book just about?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, if you accomplish nothing else, you accomplish that.
for sure.
And it's a big
Yeah,
deal. I mean, it's a big
yeah,
deal to bring some notoriety to those guys, right? And you probably
yeah.
made, you probably made their lives a lot better. I mean, both
Oh, for
financially and
sure.
everything else, which is great. I mean,
And put their arts out there. And
yeah,
now, there's 3 generations of people doing their arts and split organizations and all
right,
the other stuff that happened,
right,
but
right. The normal
none of
thing.
that would be
Right.
around without them being known from my books. Yeah, for sure.
So like when you say you trained with all these different guys, what are
Yeah,
some of the specific things that separate like one guy from another or one style
yeah,
from another? Is it
yeah,
is it distance? Is it a certain type of weapon, or is it just a
yeah,
is it a flavor?
yeah. There's definitely ice cream flavor, but then there's categories. Like you can have
Okay.
7 chocolate-based flavors
Right,
and versus just vanilla, and then you can have like pistachio weird flavors,
right, right.
But I would say the main thing, like let's just say we take this my 7 guys. Well, I'll just give you general. First, let's pretend there's a let's just pretend hypothetically there's 100 core techniques in Filipino martial art.
Okay.
Maybe there's 50. I never
Right,
count, right?
right,
And you have one technique, you can make 1,000 versions of it, right?
right.
But let's say like the base DNA, let's say there's 100, just to make an easy number. Some systems only have 20. Some
Okay.
systems take 70, but they have like 10 from here, they jump 20 from the middle and 50, 30 from the end or whatever, right? Meaning like nobody's got, they have similar basics, but then there's some overlap, but there's a bunch of systems that don't have the same stuff. So like the Balintawak style in Cebu doesn't have double sticks, or
Okay.
sword doesn't have sword and dagger. It's a single stick and a stick
Okay.
and a short stick or stick and dagger, right? Some styles don't have empty hand. They're just weapons. The Kabarawan style of Northern Luzon, they're using long poles and spear and shield, and
Okay.
they're not using short sticks that 30-inch or
Okay.
24
Right.
inch at all. Cabales' style was 24-inch stick, just about, because when he learned it from his teacher, he learned it. They were security guards on the Luzon shipping piers, very dangerous. And they had billy clubs.
Okay.
So
Okay.
his and knives. So their
Right.
thing was shorter, right? And it was made to be a quick, short infighting system. But there wasn't a lot of wasn't really double sticks. There wasn't like sword and
Okay.
dagger. But now everybody's like, oh, we have to have all this. So they're like trying to add it all in,
Bring that in. Right.
bring it in. But really there's a lot of variation there. The Illustrissimo style is really based on sword,
Okay.
not stick first. So when they do stick, they're still holding the positions and angles as if it's a sword.
Okay.
But a lot of the other Arnis guys are using sticks and saying, this is blade, but you're holding it wrong. They don't
Okay.
have the right wrist turn. The
Okay.
blade edge is banging the other blade edge, all the things you don't want to
Right.
do.
Right.
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 So they don't really understand, and where the hubris comes in or the arrogance comes in is when you see the teachers in the middle of a technique change the orientation. So they'll say, I'm blocking as a stick, but now blade, and I cut his head off, and then he
Right.
gets me and I blade cut his wrist, and then he comes in, they do a disarm, but they grab the stick and disarm. And it's like, well,
Right.
no, you just said it was a blade a
Right.
second
If
ago.
it's a blade, you're not grabbing it. Right.
You have to, if you're going to train blade or stick or blade with a stick, because you don't have one, it's
Right.
okay, right?
Right.
You can get a long stick and say it's a sword,
Right.
like a bookend, but
Right.
even and just know where the blade edge is.
Right.
But you got to keep the plot in your head.
Right.
This is the sword. I'm not going to put the blade against me and move it around. I'll put
Right.
the back of it against me.
Yeah. That's a different story. Right. Right.
But right, so they're not keeping the idea straight, the training straight, and this is where problems start evolving, because when they try and move from one to the other, it's not the same. I always say you can level down but not up, right? You can go
Right.
sword and then do a stick, right? But you can't go like stick and just think it's a sword, like,
Right.
because the defense is different. You're not going to block the sword the same way you block or deflect a stick, right?
So let me ask you a question. So the Filipino method of instruction, and
Yeah,
you can say, if this was a general yes or
yeah.
only certain teachers. So was it did it change, like there's an entry level curriculum where, okay, you have to get these down, and okay, now you've gotten good at these, so now we're going to show you this. Okay, now you've gotten good at that. Okay, very good, you're even better at the first stuff you trained in, and now we're going to show you this. Whereas it's levels of ability and levels of techniques, so it's not, you're just, they're just bouncing around showing you all different techniques. There's a way where they start and the curriculum actually goes up, which helps your level to go up. Is that their approach in general to teaching?
Well, it's starting to become the approach.
Okay.
So we could say before World War II, before the end of World War II, there was probably not much of that, but
Okay.
we don't know for sure, right? World War II is when the Filipino martial artists start wearing gis. I mean, Japanese arts, American arts,
Right.
Chinese arts are all coming into the
Right.
Philippines, and they were learning them on the military bases and things. So then they learned, like, oh, this is just our family art or our
Right.
clan art. And now, like, wow, you could teach 50 people or 30 at a time. Are you kidding me? It's always
Right.
one to one.
Right.
So then all of a sudden they're wearing gis of different
Right.
kinds.
Right.
They're lining everybody up in rows and
Right.
they're counting out numbers. And none of that really was there before. That was like
Okay.
copied from the Japanese. They were making katas. We don't have
Right.
katas in
Right.
before this, right? So Remy Presas really helped modernize the art by kind of codifying it based on he was a JKA member, Japan Karate
Okay.
Association,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And he took their Heian 1, Heian 2, Heian 3 and made Anyo 1, Anyo 2, Anyo
Okay.
3 and took the basic, thing and just turned it into our niche style. But the
Okay.
same H pattern, I pattern, and then he would throw in his moves,
Right.
So he kind of like made that happen and the art it expanded, it blew up. He was teaching in schools and military bases and everywhere else, and he really popularized the art because of that. Yeah, you need a
So
structure.
So it's interesting. So in Ishinru Karate, obviously the kata came first. The
Yeah,
basics weren't created till much later. And basically they were created because he got the Marine contract and he looked out and there's 25, 30 Marines on the floor.
what are you gonna do?
Okay. How are we teaching them kata? They don't even know how to throw a punch.
Right.
So they created the 15 upper body basics, 15 lower body basics. Okay. Jodo, same situation. Shimizu and Otofuji sensei walk into the Kodokan because Jigoro Kano saw Jodo and is like, oh, you guys have to come to the Kodokan and you have to teach this. And they walk
Right.
in, there's 100 judo guys standing there, and they're like, how are we teaching them the first kata? They don't even know how to hold a stick, right? And then
Yeah.
they come up with those 13 Jodo basics, right? So one of the things I try to tell people is it's fascinating how the training has changed, right? Which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, right? But
Mhm.
that most of the systems, the basics we're seeing are pretty modern.
Yeah.
Kata can be very old, but the basics are modern because none of these systems were taught to large groups. So
Right.
that's changed in the modern era. And like you said, World War II, post World War II, you know.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
that's when the Americans were learning on Okinawa, right? World War
right,
II.
right,
The same. It's like a schism,
right,
like something
right.
happened around World War II, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just wild to see that type of progression,
Yeah.
Um, even in practical method Chen style that I practice, we have foundational exercises. Um, that again, and when you see those moves in the form, you're like, oh, okay, well, I've been working on this now for a while. Oh, there's the move that I've been practicing as a foundation. Now here it is in the move. So I think it's a good thing. I think it helps, especially, you know, I'm sure you've experienced this too. A lot of the people I teach, they have jobs, they have families. They may not be able to devote the time that, someone
Right.
who's a professional like us is devoting to maintaining their skills and teaching and researching and doing all that. But so when you have these simple exercises to teach them in the beginning, I think it helps them. I also think it makes less people quit.
Yeah.
If you're teaching
You
them
don't
one
feel
of these hard
frustrated.
kata, right? They're getting frustrated. They're like, oh,
Right.
this is way too hard. Oh, this isn't so bad. I can do this, right? And now when they get to the more frustrating stuff, you explain to them, well, remember, you didn't feel so great when you first learned the basics. And now, yeah, this is going to take you a while, but once you get it, you'll be okay. So I think it's helped for as far as a teaching progression too, to have those things, you know. Now, in as far as five ancestor fist goes, do they have the same type of, does the curriculum progress? Is there a starting point and you have to go from A, B, C,
Mhm.
D, or is it kind of jump around? Or is it dependent
Yeah.
on the instructor you're training with? You know?
That's right. Before I answer that, and
Sure.
I wanted just to share one more thing about the Escrima training.
Okay.
Is most of the times with the old timers, they're teaching by what they call muestración or demonstration.
Okay.
You know, because they're teaching their family or their friends or the people in their barangay, uh, what to do if you get attacked. So when a guy hits you like this, okay, this is what you're going to do if your hand's down. You bring it up. If it's this way, you bring it up this way. If it's over here, you get in your wallet, you bring it this way. And they're teaching by example, but nothing's codified. And then they'll teach you the block and counter, block and disarm, whatever it's going to be. And then if you block and disarm, you have two sticks, then what's the two-stick counter? And you just repeat that. And then they'll say, like, okay, here's the fifth technique, because there could be 30 techniques
Right.
against the first strike. And then like the students start remembering it. And that's how that one person's method starts getting codified, so to
Okay.
speak. And then his students then are like, hey, we're going to teach more people now that, it's 1980, 1990. We're going to go to
Right.
the Y, we're going to go to the park. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with this. We'll call it angle one. Then you showed us how to do this. We'll call that angle two. And then you got 12 angles and you got defenses against the angles. And then you got counters and disarms, and then you got the counters to the counters and the empty hand, and then the knife, and then this, and then that it started becoming built on a curriculum of defenses against angles of attack. And then some systems take the technique itself, like an inside block, they call
Uh,
it Puma or something, and they say, okay, we'll show you all the ways this technique can work against all whatever different strikes or attacks it can work on. Then we'll show you how this one works. So it's not by the angle of the attack, but by the type of defense.
okay.
So people have like different ways, but you can see how hard it can get to remember that.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, 'cause
right.
it's a lot of material.
It's a lot of material.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think, probably too, I'm thinking what you're saying. I'm thinking that the fact that they started teaching Westerners and just started teaching bigger groups, I'm
right.
thinking that probably might have helped push the art forward a little bit,
For sure. For sure.
you know.
Yeah,
Um, I think, like I like, for one of the things I think right now, one of the problems with Okinawan karate is it's kind of, I'm not seeing those levels.
yeah,
A lot of people teaching. It's just because it's become sport based, and when it's sport based, you don't need levels, right?
right. Right.
And so before we move on to Five Ancestor Fist, let's
Yeah,
tell the Magellan story, just because I think it's a fascinating story, and it has to do with the Philippines, and it has to do with the Filipino stick fighting and spear fighting and whatever other fighting you want to look at, right? And it also shows how at some point, the Spanish were there, and there might have been a little bit of influence from the Spanish, but not as much influence as everybody thinks,
right.
and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, so the premise of a lot of entry level researchers is that Filipino martial arts must come from Spanish fencing because Magellan came to the Philippines and he was killed there in a fight, and they could say he fought against the chieftain Lapu-Lapu, Lapu-Lapu, without any armor and just his sword, killed Magellan full of body armor. It's not true. Um, Magellan had a chronicler on his voyage with him around the world named Pigafetta. Pigafetta's book has been reprinted 1,000 times for circumnavigation of the globe, and it has the whole account of landing in the Philippines. And he's on the boat writing it all out as it's happening, you know. So the conquistadors come up at low tide. They can't bring their ships in closer. They've got all the metal, you know, armor on for battle. They have to take off the lower part so they can walk and tread through the water. And they've got their swords and things that they have. And the Filipinos in Cebu, the island of Mactan, uh, just dressed the way they're dressed, whatever they were doing, and got their swords up. And Magellan's guys were coming in off the shore, and guy threw a spear in Magellan's leg. You know, it was exposed, and he went down, and then with the sword cut off his head. You know, while he's bending over. It wasn't some big battle showing the supremacy of one over the other. It was like, okay, you guys, we can keep you from coming out of the water. You know, the Spanish ended up colonizing the Philippines for 333 years. Named the island chain the Philippines for King Philip of Spain, but it even though it was the ship of Spain and Magellan is Spanish, the warriors who were fighting and the people working the boats were like Dutch and German, and they were mercenaries hired.
Right. Right.
The Spanish system became very academic. They have lots
Right.
of circles and diagrams and
Right.
lines and theory. They say it even like it got so high in the White Tower it phased itself out,
Right.
against the other styles. But you're not going to take your best intellectual Spanish swordsman to fight to take over another country. You hire mercenaries from whomever. So there was more fighting style coming in from non-Spanish countries than from Spain. And then they say, well, come on, all the terms are in Spanish for Escrima. Even Escrima is Spanish. Well, yeah, because Spain ruled for 340
They were speaking
years,
Spanish.
and the national language or the legal language was Spanish. So of course, all the guys you're meeting in the areas that were colonized before the Spanish-American War and the Americans took over was Spanish. Now, most people don't speak Spanish there.
Right.
Tagalog is the national language. English is the second most spoken language. We came in after the Spanish-American War in 1898 and then took over and put our own language in there. It's the grandparents who spoke Spanish and the great-grandparents of a different generation. So the language they're speaking is irrelevant to the history, where did the art come from? Yeah.
So I find it fascinating, I was in law enforcement for 22 years, so I've seen a fair share of life and death combat. And I always laugh with some martial arts guys. What my Tai Chi master has a saying. He said, "There's no martial art in a fight.
Right.
Like in a fight, a real fight where someone's trying to do you serious harm. It's about winning. It's
Right.
not, are my legs bent? Am I in the proper stance? How do I look? Right. And the incident you just illustrated with Magellan is a clear case of that. Here he is, he's coming out, he thinks he's in armor. And I'm assuming it was the spear fire hardened.
Yeah, probably.
Probably,
Yeah,
right?
maybe even had
I'm
a metal
thinking,
tip on it.
I mean,
Yeah,
maybe, but I don't know how much metal is in the Philippines, right?
right,
Um, and he's probably coming out and he's thinking, oh, look at these guys, they're savages, and
right.
oh, we're sophisticated. Well, look at this equipment we have, and we're going to be good. And then all of a sudden, he's dead very quickly because again,
Right.
you underestimate your opponent. And this
Mhm.
is one of the things. I mean, I talk and one of my podcasts was the deadliest martial art. And I'm sure people initially came onto that podcast thinking I was going to actually name the deadliest martial art. And meanwhile, I came on, the first thing I said, there's no such thing. There are dangerous men, there are dangerous people that are highly proficient in combat. And the other thing too is now modern times is different, but back then pretty much every man had to have some proficiency in combat and fighting ability, right? Now that's changed, right? There's a lot of men that have no idea how to fight. They're lucky if they can make a fist, right? Let alone do anything else. But in those times, you're coming up against hardened warriors. And I've seen video recently in the Amazon where some guy's trying to approach a remote tribe that doesn't want any contact with outsiders. And the next thing you know, the guy's got 4 hours sticking out. And people are like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm thinking, well, duh. Like, like,
You're
you
breaking
know,
into their home.
yeah.
Yeah,
So again, like I understand you think you're doing the right thing and your motives are probably good motives and you think, okay, but again, a person that's a dangerous person, if you're not prepared to deal with that, your probably best bet is to just kind of not get involved with it. Um, and it's interesting with that Magellan story, the fact that, yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of hubris involved there. Like as he came out, I'm Magellan, I've got these trained warriors, we've got armor, we've got top-notch, Toledo steel, whatever it is,
yeah,
and we'll show these savages, and okay, well, they didn't show the savages,
right,
and that's it says something for the level of skill of those warriors in the Philippines at that point. But I'm sure, and you could probably back this up, I'm sure there was probably ongoing tribal warfare there for tens of thousands of years,
right. Yeah.
you know?
I mean,
And
you got 72 islands ish, give or take, with as many different languages. I mean, you
right,
take a bus ride out of Manila, 30 minutes, they have a different language.
right,
You know, it just happens that Spanish and then now English and Tagalog now is the national language.
right,
Everybody's getting it in the education system. But before that, it just was called the Philippines because Magellan came and said, I'm going to take this group right here.
right,
But they were all just different peoples from
right,
different places, that were there and not having a lot of outside influence, prior to that time. They're not a homogenous group of people. That's why when people say like, oh, there's an original fighting art in the Philippines and it's called Kali and it's the mother of all the arts, it's like that's completely false.
right.
Kali is a recent name. They call it in the Philippines, they call it California because it's used in California, but not in the Philippines. Now some guys in the Philippines use it because it's good for marketing,
Right.
but it was something that was really pushed forward over here in the US by practitioners over here. And they're like, they don't have a common language amongst the islands or a
Okay.
common food group amongst the islands. How are they going to have the same master fighting art amongst everyone? Come on.
Right. Right.
It's just,
Well, but I mean, I think any culture you look at, you're going to see a tremendous range of different types of fighting styles. I mean,
right.
you look at Europe, you see the books by the different European fencing masters,
Yeah.
right? And you look at them, they're slightly different. They have, well, I do this like this. Well, I do this like this. And we know what we say about opinions, right? And
Right.
and the only way you prove something is if you actually do it for real and it works, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting how in modern times, terms that were never used for some certain arts now,
Like
this is
karate
right.
was never used.
No,
Right.
never, never. And the same thing with Okinawa. Like Okinawa, you had multiple islands, you had multiple kingdoms. They were always fighting each other, right? And now, they want to paint Okinawa as the island of peace.
Right.
And right now. But you go back, no, they were killing each other just like every other tribal society or however you want to look at it. And, people say, well, like when the Satsuma went there the first time, they didn't succeed.
Right.
So obviously it wasn't farmers with farming tools fighting the Satsuma.
Right.
It was
Right.
trained warriors, right? And then the
Yeah.
Satsuma realized, oh, wait a second, this isn't what we thought we were getting ourselves into. So they go
Right.
back and what do? They come back with a whole lot more guys.
Right.
And then they take it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting how these martial arts histories become quite interesting. Not
Yeah.
necessarily true, but and I joke and say like I'll tell some stories that I used to hear about the founder of Ishinaru, and the students will be looking at me and hanging on every word, and then when I'm done, I go, okay, just so we're clear, everything I just told you is utter nonsense. It never
Right.
happened, right? Now I'll tell you the real story, like the old Paul Harvey thing. Now
Right.
for the rest of the story, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and I've told people like Andreas Quast and other researchers that I talk to because you know, I'm a researcher for me. I'm not a researcher like you and these other guys have done. So I think the job you guys do on these things is fantastic. And like, that's one of the things when I started this little podcast and I first started doing interviews, I said, well, I can have guys on that I want to get out there. I want to get out in the public. They're doing good things and this will help promote them and maybe they can do more good things and more good research. And I say all the time, I want my history warts and all. I'm not interested in revision. I'm not interested in this or whitewashing it. Let's have the real deal. And it's okay. We're human. People make mistakes. They do things
Yeah.
they shouldn't have done. But again, that's life. That's the way it is. So that's why, like, especially within karate in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a big change in the so-called history and
Yeah.
certain things, what we thought and now what we realize just was not the case. And if not for guys like McCarthy, Andreas Quast, and other guys, I mean, we'd still be thinking karate was developed by farmers,
Right.
you know. And
Yeah.
and again, I'm assuming the Filipino martial arts originally comes from a warrior tradition,
I'm
even
not
if it's
sure.
even if
You
it's
know,
the
we
warriors protecting their village.
Well, that's what it
You know what I'm
is. It's the
saying?
guys
Right,
protecting the village.
right,
Most of them were farmers or fishermen, you know. I mean, that's how they survived. They had to eat. It's
right.
either through farming or through fishing or hunting, but they all had their styles and all a little bit different. Yeah.
Well, it's similar to the American Indians, right? So,
Yeah.
we have this vision of the peaceful American Indian, which, is just not true, right? I mean, you had certain Indian tribes that were hunting other Indian tribes to the verge of extinction.
Right.
But also you had tribes that were trying to, herd and do things and live off the land and whatever. And they were under attack from these other tribes. So obviously they could be as peace loving as they want. They better be able to fight
Yeah.
against warlike tribes that were just looking to take everything they had, whether it be their women, whether it be their horses, whatever, right? So, I mean, sadly, this is what martial arts comes from, right? It comes from conquest. I mean, if we didn't have these types of things, we wouldn't have these arts passed down to us. So on the one hand, it's like, oh, too bad it's like that. But on the other hand, if it wasn't like that, none of us would be talking about this stuff, you know?
Right.
Um, so let's talk about Five Ancestor Fist.
Yeah. So you asked about like a training curriculum.
Right.
Oh, right. So the way our group, um, most of the groups of the style. So there was a founder, Chua Gyok Beng or Ka Yu Ming in Mandarin, who had 10, he called the 10 tigers or 10 strong fighters disciples, but he had other disciples,
Right.
but they weren't tigers. Maybe they were more intellectual,
Right.
But some of them got more famous than the tigers, and some of the tigers don't have lineages anymore. So there's about maybe 6 lines out of the original group of guys. There's about 6 lines, and we're all friends with each other, know each other. And all the forms are a little different. The application's a little different. And the guys who came along later were like, well, we got the latest version of his art, and you guys got the old original when he was just starting out. We're like, no, we got the original. You guys got the modified because he was tired of teaching, so he wasn't correcting any. You can do that all day.
Right.
Like, who knows? But anyway, so in our group is the line is called Beng Kiam, and we have the international organization is called Beng Hung after Chua Gyok Beng, the founder, and Tang Pa Hung, our grandmaster. And it really starts with the basis from San Chen, right? You guys call it San Chen, I say San Jan in Mandarin, we say San Chen in Hokkien. And it's the 3 battles form. And that's everything in the art, almost everything is completely in that form.
So I just want to preface this. So when you say Sam Chen and you're talking everything's with this form is not being done like the Okinawan version, like they do in Goju, where it's slow.
Different choreography. No, it's slow. They're slow and fast, though.
They're slow and fast. Right.
Yeah.
But in general, on Okinawa, the Wichiru do a fast version, but the other schools don't necessarily do a fast version.
Everybody's got different versions, right? Of the same thing, right? Right. But basically, it's hard and soft movements after each other, right? Goju is hard, soft, right? And you want to have so it trains the breathing, right? It trains the body engine, the power engine, the body structure, the tense and relax, the contraction of the lower abs, Sing Chi to Dantian, all these things, right? And then it teaches you how to project the energy or the force quickly through momentum and then stop it so the Fajin comes out, as you know from
Right.
feeding crane.
Right.
And then we have the slow movement for the sinking and the iron body training and so forth. And it's all of this stuff and the basic stances and the positions for all the movements are all in this form. It's so, so important. And also, our opening set salutation has 8 moves, and it's called Kikun, meaning not chi, but it's spelled,
Right.
it's Romanized QI, but it's not chi as in energy chi.
Okay.
It means to start or to commence.
Okay.
This character for chi, Kikun, and in that 8 point set is all of the principles of float, sink, swallow, spit, turn, hard, soft, and that one opening starts every single form in the style, and there's over 50 forms, not including the 2-man sets and the weapons. And it's like that's even more of an essence than Samchen. I mean, that starts Samchen,
Right.
but it also has to start every form. So
Right.
even that has the essence of all the structure and the power and the absorption of, how do you receive force and hold it in root, and how do you express force out, is all within that. So if you wanted to get just down to it, I mean, that's the essence, is the Kikun. The next essence, so you can move with it and have some techniques with it, is the Samchen. And then there's more Chen forms. Then the next is Tiante Lin Chen, Heaven, Earth, and Man battle form, which
Okay.
is harder to do than Samchen because you use more strength, more dynamic tension. You do it slower, and there's only once or two quicker moves in it, and the rest are all tension, tension, tension,
Okay.
tension, 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 tension. And it's 3 levels, right? Where Samchen's usually all in the middle.
Right.
You
Right.
Yeah, it's all in the middle gate, right? Not below the waist or above the
Right.
the chest line. So Tiante Lin Chen is actually a stronger, harder, more robust Samchen. And then after that, Ping Ma Chen, there's more Chen
Okay.
in her style. Yeah. There's plenty of chens, but you also need the fist forms, which we call the kun or fist forms, right? So we alternate chen, kun, and you could do 20 forms in a row and have every other, you know. And so you'd warm up Sanchen, and then you do the 20 direction punches form.
So,
And like
so
that's
is
all the power is just whipping out because
okay.
there's no tension in it at all.
So that's what I was going to say. So what I was going to
Yeah.
ask is, so I mean, I know in Chen style Tai Chi and feeding crane, the ultimate goal is short distance power.
Yeah.
So if you can't generate short distance power, the teachers will look at you and say, yeah, you don't have it yet. And
Yeah.
frankly, for my karate friends, it's supposed to be exactly the same thing. And
Yeah.
I'm just not really seeing it anymore. So yeah, so that's the interesting thing too.
Yeah. Mm.
And when I initially, the first time I trained with Lu Changyi, he said to me on a break, he took me on the side and said, you move very well. And I said, oh, thank you, Shifu. I appreciate the compliment. And he goes, no, no. And he joking, he says to me, you must teach feed and crane. And I remember looking at him like he was crazy. And I said, can I at least complete 1 day of seminars before I start teaching feed and crane? And he laughed and goes, you know what I mean? I says, yeah, I do. But, I'm just here. I'm learning. I'm getting the feel. And then he mentioned the fact that he, he said, we know karate had the power. We know it did. And we don't know what happened. Like, where did that power go? And I said, well, I think the direction of sport on Okinawa, when you're not training for life and death anymore, and you're training for sport and how something looks, what do you need the power for? You don't need the power.
Right.
I'm fighting a 6'5" criminal, hardcore criminal, who does not want to go back to jail because he's wanted on a murder warrant or whatever he is. And, I catch him jumping the turnstile, but I don't know that he's wanted for that. And now when I
Right.
approach him, now the life and death fight's on. When I hit him, I want it when I hit him, he's got a problem. Not that I hit him and he looks at me. And and I try to, and that's one of the things initially, because we were talking about Sam Shin too, and San Shin and Okinawan karate is, for a long time, I trained with so many different Ishinru teachers, and I trained with some Goju teachers, and they talked about San Shin and what it's doing and stuff, but their approach and the way they taught it, it didn't seem to really have that benefit. And then when I started studying Chen style Tai Chi Chuan, and Master Chen talked about certain things, and I realized, oh, wait a second, that's what we should be doing in San Chen. And then obviously when I learned Sam Chen from Shi He Kwan, feeding crane kung fu, um, the year after I learned it, Master Lu came back to the school and I said, let me show you how I'm practicing the Okinawan Sanshin. And then I showed it to him and he looked at me and he goes, oh, you're too smart. And I was working now in the Okinawan Sanshin on the short distance power. And then I felt like, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. And when I started, so I have a few different ways I teach and approach Sanshin. One I call like a Qigong way. And then the other way, I say, okay, well, we're going to work on short distance power and this way. And, initially I show the very slow way. And then usually after black belt, I say, okay, you can also train it this way. And then, I always get asked the question, well, how should I practice it, sensei? And, my answer is always, well, how about both ways? Like
Right.
you practice it either way, you're getting a different benefit from each way, So I find it interesting that within the curriculum, you have the forms where there's more free movement and you're working on that power, that explosive movement. And I'm sure the footwork is probably faster. Am
Oh
I
yeah,
correct on that?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing in karate, where the footwork is just so incredibly slow. And even in Tai Chi, my Tai Chi master says it all the time. He says, we do this form and we're in these stances, but when you fight, you gotta move. There's no stances. Move, man. Move, move, move. And it's the same thing with karate, they're stepping back and blocking. And I'm like, what are you doing? You've got to move. And that's the one thing that I find interesting with the Chinese forms is, it's built, seems to built into all the real Chinese martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that power generation through the Fajin, but it's not a rigid power where you're stuck and you can't move, where eventually you're learning how to issue that power as you're moving. And that to me, I think is probably, the highest level you can reach. Because if you can issue
Yeah.
that as you're actually moving in combat, I think that's a pretty
Well,
impressive skill.
the Sam Chen teaches the root from static position, right?
Right,
You step into your
right,
stance
right,
called Sanchin Dachi. We
right,
call it San Chenbei.
right,
You know, and you pull the legs in, you root down, you sink your energy, you tilt the pelvis, all these things to root the body to the ground. But then you have to get that same root while you're moving.
right,
Like if you could be hard as a telephone pole shoved in the ground, but if you can't move around, the guy's going to still beat you.
right,
You can have the best body structure and strongest arms that nobody can bend in the world, but
right,
he can just punch your face. Who cares?
right.
Right.
So
I
it's
mean,
interesting. I studied with a senior Goju teacher, Bob Tayani, and he used to, when he described when you first step into San Shin stance to start the kata, he used to say, have a checklist in your head, right? And start at the feet and work your way up and make sure you're in that
yep.
structure and then
Yep.
sink and then do this and I thought it was great. And then what I say too is I tell my students, think of it as one of those these tripods we have now, which unfold and a leg comes out. And I'm like,
Right.
we have to snap it into place. And as your body, like each thing is clicking into place as you're getting into Sanshin, like don't rush it. Don't rush to go to that first punch.
Right.
Make sure everything is aligned and everything's good. And initially guys laugh, but then when they think about it, they're like, oh, it makes sense. And I thought his idea of having that checklist,
Yeah.
I thought was a great idea, you know
Yeah.
simple, but makes you say, okay, yeah, all right, let me start at my feet. Let me go up to my ankles. Let me go to the calf. Let me go to the knee. And you just work your way up to make sure everything's in the proper position. And you realize real quick when you do that it's ridiculously hard.
Oh, it's super hard
Yeah, it's like,
to
forget
do
about
that form correctly
it.
with
Yeah, it's
intention and in the moment and all the stuff happening. You'd be exhausted by, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, man. By the second step, you want to get a lemonade
I'm
or
in, I'm in my
whatever.
I'm in my 46th year, right?
Yeah.
And I tell people when I start teaching Sanshin, okay, like choreography, one of the easiest forms you're gonna ever learn.
Oh,
Doing
totally.
doing it right, probably never gonna happen. And then they'll say to me, well, what about you, Sensei? And I'll say, okay, I'll be in here once a year, and I don't know, maybe I ate my Wheaties that day, and I do a San Shin, and I finish, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was a good one. And then, okay, maybe 2 years go by. And I don't do another one where that I thought I kind of got that one, right? And then okay, the following year, okay, oh, this is a good one. All right. And then again, another year maybe goes by. And that's the thing I tell people, when you talk about the three battles, right? And you can whatever three battles you want to talk about, mind, body, spirit, however you want to do it, right? It's it is three battles. Can you coordinate everything? And can you do that form, the whole form, start to finish, where everything's coordinated? And the answer is virtually never. I mean, it's just incredibly, incredibly difficult.
It's a hard discipline
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's a
really
hard
is.
discipline,
You know,
you know.
Okinawa, they don't teach it to children.
Yeah.
Um, I don't either in my dojo till they're about 15 or 16. Then I'll start showing it to them. Um, but yeah, it's an incredibly difficult form. And you said there's 50 forms in the.
Yeah, there's about 50,
Okay,
um, and now there's more. I mean, but I don't know anybody who remembers them all off the top of their head. We get to like 33, 32. Yeah. And if you don't practice them all, you drop down to 20 real quick. And then you just have to watch a video or check your notes on the sequence. You're like, oh, that's right. Because it's in there, but it's just way too many. And the thing is, so many of the early forms have repeat combinations,
okay,
and I think the point, but you're turning 90 versus 180.
right,
It's with the other side. There's a different setup for it,
right,
right? So you're learning, like if they just had line drills for that and said, like,
right,
here's a line drill for this three technique
right,
combination. Here's how you get it from this angle and from this angle, from this lead. If he's coming this way, the opponent's coming this way, and use the same thing. They wouldn't have all the forms, but then nobody's going to remember all those drills to teach and in practice. So they put them into forms, but then you realize, you get 20 under your belt. And they're short forms, take 30
right,
seconds to
right,
half a
right,
minute. They're not
right,
like these long forms,
right, right,
they're like 40 moves or something.
right,
And then you're like, wait a minute, these same, say 15 combos are in almost half the forms. They must be important combinations for the
right,
style.
right.
The founder thought these were important enough to include more than any other combinations. And I think that's where you start to see the essence of what he's talking about. Because in his day, and in most of Fujian province, it's five forms. They have five forms.
Right.
And then he would let you go out to teach when you got your sixth form, go open a school. You want to promote somebody, go to a seventh form.
Right.
When I started, it was 10 forms to get through the basic, two weapons, and two more forms to start teaching. But so then you're 12 forms, two weapons, Sai and pole. And then you had, I think, 7 2-man sets in there, plus some iron lock weight training and some other things, arm
So when you
banging.
say Sai, you're talking the same Sai as the
Yeah,
Okinawan
Sai. We call it Tep-P, iron ruler,
iron
like
ruler.
size.
So,
Yeah.
so do they have an origin for that? Have you heard an origin for that? Or is it like I've come to
The
understand?
farmers, making
It's to
holes
the
in the ground
mist,
for rice
it's to the mist of time.
in the midst
Um,
of time. But
you
they're
know,
very thick and heavy Sai. They're not like the ones you
uh,
get at Century or whatever. Yeah.
so I'll tell you, I led the Ishinryu karate demonstration for Master Shimabuku at the grand opening of the Budokan in '97, and they had a museum set up in the Budokan. And they had a Sai in a case, and I have a picture of it. It was taken from a criminal by Ufukuchiko Sensei, who was a police constable on Okinawa. And when I was looking at that Sai in the case, my immediate response was, "Holy crap, that's nothing like a modern Sai."
Yeah.
Like if you
You'll
got
break your wrist if you
if
get hit
you
with it.
got brained with that,
Oh, yeah,
my
totally.
God, like you are dead. Like it was
Yeah.
big and heavy and then there's that was interesting though, is there's that photo that someone found of I guess they're two Chinese law enforcement guys, for lack of a better term. They have a prisoner who had committed uh he had done a murder of a bunch of Christian missionaries in
Mm,
China. And the two guys have him tied up. He's down on his knees. I don't know if you've ever seen the photo.
mm.
It's a pretty amazing photo. And each one of them is carrying a sai.
Wow.
So the
Cool.
two law enforcement guys are each carrying a sai. And if you look close, you see, yeah, that looks a little bit like it's got a little bit more meat on it than the modern
Yeah,
ones,
yeah.
you know? So yeah, it's interesting. So it's got staff and sai. Are there any other weapons in
Oh, yeah. We broadswords,
Okay.
straight swords, three-section staff, shield
Okay.
and sword, spear, guandao, pudao, trident, all of them. Yeah.
Okay. So now you had to learn all this?
I learned maybe 10 of the weapons.
Okay. Well, 10's a lot.
Yeah, multiple forms each, you know.
Now, do they
And then
have
the staffs are different because there's a short monkey staff, the peddler
okay.
pole, and then the 7 foot the staff, the six
Okay.
foot staff, and they got
Okay.
different forms.
Now,
Yeah.
do they do two-man sets?
Yeah, for the weapons, yeah, but I didn't learn them because I didn't want
Okay. Okay. So I was
to.
just well, I'm just
Because
curious.
once you learn the Filipino stuff, you don't want to do two-man weapon sets
Right.
because all the Filipino stuff is it's flow and it's reaction and it's not choreographed for the good practitioners,
Right.
you know. And if you start having to learn the two-man forms for any other weapon system, it's frustrating and cumbersome because you're like, I wouldn't sit there and do that while he goes around and hits me from this side.
Right.
And when I do this and he's going to strike, I'm going to hit him 3 times before he comes in. Then I would move here. And you want to keep that spontaneity that you would get from a Escrima or an Nice and
Right.
not lose it to the two-man set. But I'll tell you something. When I lived in Japan, I went to the Budokan to see a big martial art demonstration.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was Gakia Sensei was there for doing a Kobudo, Marayoshi Kobudo demonstration, and it was the most fantastic weapons demonstration I'd ever seen. They were just awesome. The
So,
power, they weren't doing it slow and cumbersome. The power and the
right.
speed and the frigging intensity, for me, they stole the whole demo. I
So
mean,
let
the styles.
so let me tell you my first experience with Gakia Sensei. So I trained in Kobudo, Mariyoshi Kobudo with Mikio Nishiuchi, who turned out to not be what he claimed to be. Did some things that I had a problem with, and a lot of other people did. We left, and I went to Okinawa, and I took 2 seminars. I took a seminar with the Ryukyu Kobudo people in the morning, and I took a seminar with the Mariyoshi people because I'm thinking, well, Ishinru's lineage is Taira Shinken. Maybe I'll go with these guys because I had a sour taste in my mouth,
Right.
Nishiuchi. And I said in the afternoon I'll go with the Mariyoshi, and then I'll make my decision. And the Ryukyu people were great. But in the afternoon, uh the Mariyoshi people came out, and there was a lot of them, a lot. And they they did a demo where there was a guy who was like the MC, and he's just going, Gakia, Yamashiro, bah, 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 bah. And these guys just are grabbing weapons off a tarp, and each weapon looks more beat to shit than
Then
the
the
one
next,
next
yeah,
to
yeah,
it. So first
yeah.
off, I saw that, and I'm like, oh,
There's some real training.
oh, hold on a second here. And then they start going at it. And then, like, maybe a guy gets his finger hit, right? Because they're going like maniacs, right? And then as they're walking out, the one guy's elbowing the other guy, going like pointing at his finger, like, oh, you got me a good one there. And I'm like, okay, all right, time out, Mike. These are your guys. These are your
Yeah, yeah,
people. This is the tribe you need to belong to.
right.
And and then training, working with Gakia for about 17 years, and doing things with him, and experiencing when I'm doing something in a certain way, and then he'd show me, no, if you do it like this is what's going to happen to you. And we do the two-man choreographed weapons drills, but what's interesting is each dojo is supposed to create their own. So from dojo to dojo, you see different ones. And
Mm,
like what I tell people is you need to understand these two-man weapon sets are part of the process. So
yeah,
we do that because initially you're a guy that's sitting behind, like maybe you're an IT guy, okay? And you're not used to a sai coming at your head, right?
that's right.
So we want you to get that fear out of you where you can do things and move. And then when I start showing them bonkai, the oyo, the actual fighting techniques, which are he attacks and he's finished. And then they're like, oh, wait a second. I'm like, yeah, yeah. Though the choreography stuff, that's just something to develop your timing, your distance, get used to the feel of the weapon. But
Right.
this is how you really fight with the weapon. And Gakia was one of the guys that did that. And that was for me an eye-opener. Because a lot of the Ishinru guys, they don't really have a good foundation in the Okinawan Kobudo. I mean, they just
Yeah.
don't. Um, but that was an eye opener to me as far as with Gakia. And you're not the first guy that's told me that because Andreas Quast told me the same thing. He says, I never got to meet Gakia, but man, I've seen some film of him where he's doing
Hmm.
a demo, and it's like, holy crap, those guys are going at it. And I'm like, yeah, and that was a bunch of the Matayoshi guys, and that's what impressed me, and that's what made me go with them and train with those guys.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure you see it too. I mean, I see it not just Okinawan weapons, I see it in Japanese weapons, I see it in Chinese when they're doing two-man sets, that all the action takes place in between the two people.
Right.
Like there's no attack, right? And in my dojo, the young guy or the person goes to swing the bow and come at my neck. And I explain to him, it's the neck in training, but you'd be smoking me in a temple in combat, right? But when I don't move and the bow is a foot in front of my neck and misses me, and I stand there and look at him and they look at me and I go, well, why should I block? There's
There's
no
nothing to
there's
block.
no there's no
Nothing to
threat to
block.
me. You
Right.
have to, if I don't feel threatened, I'm not going to waste my time.
Right.
And that's the way we train in my dojo, but I see a lot where they go very fast and all the action is taking place in this nether region between the two combatants and no one's ever a threat. And my last week's podcast was on the Koru, and that's one of the things I talked about. That
Yeah.
I've seen a huge change in Koru from the 70s. And I have people from the 70s on my channel footage. And then I see those same Ru now, and I'm like, okay, where's the intensity? Where's the actual attack? And I just feel if they don't get a handle on it and start elevating the intensity of certain Ru, we're gonna have more Ru die. And I mean, how many have disappeared? It's something, these are important things. They should be practiced correctly. They should survive. We want them to be for future generations. It's almost like a cultural, asset, if you want to say,
Right. Right.
and I think it's important. Like I say all the time, I wish I could study every martial art, but I think my wife would, run me over with a car or something if I start studying another one, right?
Right.
So so where do you see your future going as far as things? Do you have more books in mind? I mean, and tell people how many books you've written.
Well, 15 so far,
Just a
and
few.
just a few. Yeah. I think 5 on Escrima, a couple Kung Fu Qigong book, and some health books. But I'm working on this really monster 5 Ancestor fist book
Mm.
based on the orthodox teachings of the founder, Chog Yok Beng. They ended up excavating some places, his family, and found his written manuscripts that people thought
Oh,
had been burned during a Japanese invasion. And so they have all those, and then some other of his early disciples had written stuff that has now come up. And more books from China have come out with, material from older teachers. And Russ Smith and I've had been translating them for years and years and years. And now I've got this together with my teacher's stuff and my own insights and understanding. And right now the book's about 297 pages,
okay.
and I got to get it down to like 220 before
Okay.
I add pictures. That's just
Okay.
text. I
Right.
think it's too long, but it's not a forms book.
Well,
It's not.
well, you could always do a volume 1 and 2.
Yeah,
Then I
but I'll
get
get
you. Then I get you on for 2 more podcasts. But
there.
go
You
ahead.
go. But yeah, and the whole point is, I mean, there were no Gocho books before. There was like 3 in English ever, and then like 2 from China or some or Hong Kong or whatever. And then all of a
Right.
sudden, in the last 20 years, more people have been writing in China, more people have been writing in the Philippines and Indonesia, and the books have been coming out. And so there's more things available, and
Okay.
because the art's getting bigger,
Right.
slowly, but it's getting bigger. But there's no book on the power engine, the body structure, and the principles of the style.
Okay.
It's always forms and applications and techniques, right?
See,
And
that's
so,
always the thing I'm interested in.
right.
Like I'm interested, like the one book that Russ translated. I
Yeah.
refer to it's almost like another mini Bubishi.
Oh, the Taizutron.
Yeah, the Taizo. I
Taizutron.
take I
Yeah.
take it off the shelf. I just open it any page. I read it. And I'm like, I let it percolate, right?
Yeah.
So that I think is important. I think we need more of that. I think
Yeah.
there's plenty of techniques,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. This is just all the original writings translated plus the new writings plus sports science on top to explain. So you don't have to say chi and yi and shen all
Right.
the time. You can say what it is.
So it's funny about that. My Taiji master never uses the word chi.
Yeah.
He says that to him it's a cop out. You have to develop the physical alignment, the physical ability to generate and move. And if you do that, then of course your chi will flow.
Right.
But if you can't move right, then your chi is not going to flow, right?
Right.
But everybody wants to say, oh, well, you can't do that because your chi is weak. It's not because your technique sucks. It's because your chi,
Right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, come on, right?
Not
And
because you need to train more.
Yeah. So the five ancestor fist, how old is that?
Well, so you could say the we could say 130 years, something like
Okay.
that. But
Okay.
the five styles it's based on are,
Oh,
you
far
know,
older.
thousand.
Okay.
I mean, how old is White Crane? That's
Right.
and how old
Right.
is Taizu Chuan, Emperor Fist? That's like the original style,
Right.
in China. So
Right.
you could say really it comes from five really, really, really old styles. But Chua Guk Beng, Kai Yu Ming in Mandarin, he put them together, and then um, kicked everybody's butt. He challenged the top Taizu masters, beat them. They became his student under his style. And then the Crane master beat him, became a student under his style. And that's how it worked. And that's how
Right.
he got it big. And now it's the largest, the most widely practiced art in Fujian province in
Okay.
Quanzhou. Yeah. And it's a national treasure for the country. Um, and it's in the school systems, elementary, middle school, and colleges
Okay.
as a requirement. Uh, and they even made an aerobics class out of it, five ancestor aerobics for
Okay.
the kids in the lower grades.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's a big cultural phenomenon now over there, but it's been kind of wushuified a little, you know,
you know,
and,
I,
and you know, what can
I
you do?
I think you're seeing that in pretty much, a little bit in all the
Yeah,
Chinese arts. I mean, you see it in Taiji where they have government forms, shortened Taiji forms.
right,
In practical method, we only have the Yilu and the Erlu. We don't have any short forms. We have the broadsword and straight sword, and those technically are not an official part of practical method.
right,
Chen style is strictly the Yilu, the Erlu. Um, but like more modern teachers have broken the long form up into a 24 or
right.
32, and then there's forms for competition now in Taiji, you
Well,
know,
and culture as
and
well.
yeah, and again, I don't have any problem with that. If that's what you want to do, God bless you. Me, no. But if you want to do that and that's what you like, I don't have a problem with it. I think anything that helps to, and I also think sometimes the younger people that start in the more sport arena, as they get older, I think look to transition into the real study of the more deeper
Yeah.
art and are
The real
not
one's not as exciting. And the
right,
sport one keeps them excited and they really love the art. They want to
right,
get deeper into the essence.
right.
But if you start with the essence, you don't keep the students,
Right. It's very hard. Right. I
Yeah,
mean, like I do even my kids' classes here in karate and kobudo. I mean, I have them doing all these games that are like karate games. They think they're having fun. They don't even realize I'm teaching them karate. And then
right,
I realized I said I can't have a kids class that's like my adult class. And then when they hopefully they stick around, they hit 12 or 13. And I'm like, okay, I tell a parent it's time for them to move into the adult class. And now when they get into the adult class, they're like, oh my God. Sensei,
right.
you didn't teach like this in the kids class. This stuff is like some of this stuff is really dangerous. I had a couple of teenagers just say to me, I showed a technique and they said, well, you could kill a guy with that. And I was like, well, yeah, hopefully we never have to use it. But what if some guy is trying to drag you into a car?
Yeah,
I mean, you may have to really defend yourself and seriously injure and possibly take a life to save yourself or someone else. And that's what these arts all started as, right?
right,
And now, I mean, you have kind of two directions. You have the guys that are doing the martial arts that are looking for the original intent, and then you have the guys that are sport, And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with either one of them.
right.
But I think when you did my line of work, I think it's hard for me to get excited putting on foam hand guards and foot guards and a foam helmet and going up and trying to score a point on a guy. It's just not getting me excited. It's just,
Yeah,
you know, and you see arts like Escrima where they're going at it with the sticks, and you're like, you could make a mistake here and someone could get really hurt, you know, and that's what I like. I like it where it's a little bit more dangerous. It's a little on the edge, and you mentioned all these forms, right? For the five ancestor fist and Master Lu Chang'e, he would always say to me, "Oh, there's 21 forms. There's 21 forms." And I'm thinking, "Oh crap, 21 forms. I got to learn 21 forms." And I only found out recently there's only 7 forms. So when he says 21, it's for all of White Crane.
right,
But he's only teaching feeding crane because they've
right,
kind of separated now. You've
right.
got the fork
Singing
crane,
crane and
yeah,
right. Yeah,
sleeping crane, whatever the other one is, right?
Mhm.
So so for me, when I found out there was only seven, I was like thrilled. I was
Right.
like, oh my God, there's only seven. I know four, so that's great. I only have to learn
Right.
three. You know, it's not all
Yeah,
these,
what
the other forms. So
in
it's
Gocho they have what they call the four big roads to Gocho, to four big roads to five ancestor fists,
okay.
right? Which are the four base forms. And then
Okay.
there's like that all the lines do and pretty much the same. And then there's
Okay.
you could pick two more after that or three more, that are really popular and add more techniques or more levels of defense,
Right.
higher, lower, sideways, or whatever. But really, it's the four big roads. I mean,
So it's interesting, right? Because I always find it fascinating.
yeah,
You do all these different arts, I do all these different arts. How human nature, right?
you
So
want
you
more.
look at Okinawan karate, and prior to the school boycott that they created, everybody did Seisan first. So Seisan was like the foundational form for every
Right,
style of Okinawa. Now, it might be slightly different, but it was Seisan, right? And it's interesting you're saying you've got these four forms that all the different branches do, right?
right.
And that's kind of the start off forms. Okay, this is what we all do to get you a good foundation. All right. And now after this, okay, now we're doing this. And then maybe there's variation, which you kind of saw in the Okinawan styles. Okay, everyone learned Seisan first. Okay, but in our style, the second kata is this. And oh, in our style, we don't do that kata, we do this. And it's not saying that one style is better than the other, but it's just interesting how there's almost always this foundation initially, and then everything blossoms off that foundation, you know?
Yeah. It's almost like if you learn these four, those seven, or whatever it is, these two, that you've got the essence for self-defense.
Right.
But you fall in love with the art. We got more for you over here. You can get even better at this martial art,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Well,
And
I mean, and that's interesting too, because like my Tai Chi master says, like when I started doing studying Chen style Tai Chi Chuan with him, I I was teaching all these other arts, and I was doing Chen style for me. I had no intention to teach it, but of course I start doing it, and then he comes in, and my guys see him, and they're like, okay, well, we want to learn this. So then eventually I became an indoor disciple, and I began teaching it or whatever. But I would say that I worked on the first form for over 5 years. And I would go, and other disciples would say, "Well, Mike, let us teach you Erlu. Let us teach you the straight sword." And I would say, "No, no, no, thanks, no, thanks." Right? And I told my guys, I said, "Eventually, we'll learn that, but I want the foundation. I don't want to be learning all these forms, and now I'm struggling with everything, and I'm not good at anything." And
mhm,
I mentioned that to my Taiji master, Chen Zhangwei. I said, "Shifu, the guys are telling me to learn this and learn that, but I'm just going to work on Yilu." And he said to me, it was interesting. He goes, "Well, Mike, you teach all these other things. So it doesn't matter to you. You'll just
right.
work on Yilu till you can get it because that's what you want to do." But a lot of these guys, if they're only doing Tai Chi, they
They
need
need more.
so we thought that was interesting. And the interesting thing was in my school, like when people were learning the Yilu and we were all learning it, for a while before they started the next one, no one ever said, "Hey, when can I learn the Erlu?" Because they realized the Yilu was so hard. I mean, it's very long. I mean, if you did an actual move a day, it's about 350 moves. So it's ridiculous, right? And so it's so complicated that no one was in a rush to learn the second one.
Mm,
They're trying to get a foundation in that first one before they even think of the second one. But I understand like what you're saying is as these arts became more modern, and it's the same thing. Like you see arts that never had weapons, and then their students leave and they go train with a weapons guy, and they're like, "Oh, wait a second. If I had weapons, maybe he would have stayed here." So now they
right.
start adding some weapons to the curriculum. And then like Yamani-Ru on Okinawa, it's a bow system. But now they're saying these other schools are teaching all these other weapons. Okay, well, they're going there to learn Sai and Twifa and Nunchaku.
Mhm.
Okay, we better come up with kata for Sai and Twifa and Nunchaku. And it's just interesting how these things develop. So some of it is almost like it's a modern idea of where I wanna have students come to me. I'm doing this
Yeah.
for a living and I have to earn a living. And I get it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But it's just interesting how these things have developed, some of them along those lines. Like I remember Master Chen telling me that you'd go to Master Hung and say, "I'd like to learn the straight sword form." and he never did the sword forms. And he'd say, "Go talk to Chen Faka's granddaughter. She does the sword form. Go learn it from her." Like he wanted nothing to do with that. He's very old school. Practical method, Chen style Taiji is these two forms. That's it, right? This is what I learned from Chen Faka, and I don't, didn't learn anything else. And but yeah, I get it, and I do the sword forms. I like them. I think they're athletic. As you get older, you're jumping around. It helps keep you in shape. But yeah, it's just fascinating how these arts have developed. Um, you know, and it's amazing. I'm sure you feel the same way from when we started, how martial arts has just exploded into this worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, you know. I mean, I'm sure you remember when you first started, you're looking for books on martial arts, and you're like, you can't find anything. And then some of the stuff you find, it's not so good. And then all of
Mm.
a sudden you find a good book and you're like, wow, right? But now you look and there's so many good books and there's so much material. And now you also has video as a resource, which when we started learning, there was no
YouTube
such
is
thing.
24/7. You can see
Yeah.
every master of every style.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
it's amazing. And, again, for me, who's into martial arts, I get a lot of Chinese martial arts popping up on my feed, which is great because, I always stop and watch it. And it's not that I'm necessarily ever going to study that art, but I just like watching how these guys move. He moves a little like this. That's a little different. How's he doing that? And I'll watch it a few times. And I just think it's great. And it's amazing just how many different arts there are. Oh my God, it's just crazy.
Just up to the imagination.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm happy when an art gets a good foothold, where now it's not on that precipice of disappearing.
Right.
Like I don't know if that was ever the case with Five Ancestor Fist,
For
you know,
sure.
right? But now, okay, now we brought it back. Now it's flourishing. Okay, let's keep that going. Like the style of jujitsu I study, I think there's only probably worldwide, and I'm probably being generous. I don't think there's 100 people practicing it.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't get a handle on it, it's going to go away. And that's one of the things I just hate to see when these arts disappear. So when you think that book will be ready?
Well, I wanted it to be ready this past April for the eighth for the death anniversary of my teacher, but
Okay.
it did not make it. It was bigger than I thought once I got started. So I'm probably thinking in the fall, maybe November,
Oh,
December. If I
okay.
can,
So we're
if,
talking. So that's a better answer than I thought I was getting.
yeah. I mean, it's in, about 300 or just under that of data dump rough
Okay.
draft and I've cleaned up the first 78 pages are tight, but I
Okay.
still got and every time you clean a chapter, the chapter ends up at 9 pages or 10 pages. You've taken 10 or 12 pages out of redundancy and
Right.
repetitiveness and stuff that
Right.
because I would write a chapter at a time and it'd be everything I know about the thing of this chapter. And then you realize you wrote all that stuff, you
In a
know,
previous chapter.
in previous chapters, you've talked about many of those things. You can just refer back,
Right.
right? So
Right.
the book can get less redundant and tighter and stronger, but it's all together.
Oh,
And then
good.
after that, it's just planning out drawings and photographs. Yeah.
All right. Good. Very good. All right. Well, I look forward to it, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want you back. I mean, the book
Thank you.
comes out. I'll read it. We'll get you back on, and we can discuss it, and hopefully sell some books. And hopefully, by that
That'd
point,
be
I'll have
great.
like 15,000 subscribers, and there'll be more people. I got to tell you, the interviews are helping. I mean, the interviews are helping a lot because, like, you have a following. So now what happens is your
Right.
guys see my channel for the first time.
Right.
Um, like I said, I'm hoping at some point I'd love to get more video of different Escrima up there. Because I don't
Yeah.
have that much Escrima up there, but I'll hopefully I'll do that. And it's just attracting different people like Andreas Quast. I got a big bump. Russ, I got a big bump because they go to the channel and they realize, oh my God, there's 1,400 videos. And a lot of it
Yeah.
is historic stuff. It's not just me doing crap, right? It's really high level teachers doing different things. And some teachers that people maybe didn't even know were on video, whether it be Drager Sensei or, some other people, right?
Mhm.
And so it's been great. It's been working great. And I got a whole bunch of other people lined up to do interviews with that
Nice.
interview.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's going great. And everybody, like you said, you might know some other guys that you can refer
Yeah.
to me, and yeah, that'll be great. And I like interviewing guys where they're not arts that I necessarily do, right? Because what I do is I learn stuff, right? Which is good for me. And then
Yeah.
maybe some of the guys that maybe only follow me for karate or kobudo or Chen style tai chi, now they see something up and they're like, oh, let me look into that. And maybe who knows, that guy decides, wow, five ancestor fist is really what I want to do, or a scream is really what I want to do. And I'm always of the opinion that you got to find what you want to do, and what you want to do may not be one of the arts I do. And so I like doing the interviews a lot, and I appreciate the guys coming on. I appreciate you coming on. This has been great,
Thank you.
and
Yeah.
I look forward to the book. And
Thank you.
thanks again for coming on to Martial Truth.
You're very welcome. Share me the link and I'll share it out on my
I
socials.
will. I'll 100% send it to you. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike.
Hope you enjoyed my interview with Mark Wiley. I know I did. I mean, it was great talking to him. I loved hearing all the stories, all the things about him training, the different arts he trains in, and I'm looking forward to his new book that hopefully comes out in the near future. We'll get him on again and talk about the book. Again, if you like the podcast, please share it. Click that like button. All right. Consider becoming a member of the channel, monthly member. We have a lot of videos, instructional nature, that aren't available on the free side. All right. If you're not a subscriber, please become a subscriber. And that like button is very important. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. All right. So again, I hope you enjoyed this one. There'll be no podcast next week. I'm taking a vacation. Yes, a real vacation. So no podcast next week, and we'll start up again the week after that. Once again, couldn't do it without you guys. Appreciate everybody that watches and participates, and I thank you all. All right, and thanks again. Take care.